So what I'm going to ask of this panel is they're going to introduce themselves. They're going to do a 1 minute. Hold on, I got an iPhone too. They're going to do a 1 minute intro of who they are, what they stand for, something about the agency and the organization and where their heart is. This is a conversation about passion as well as solutions. We're going to start at this end. We're going to go down. We're going to try to keep it to 1 minute or less. You don't have to go 1 minute.
That's me. All right, so less than 1 minute. My name is Justin Hansford. I'm a law professor at St. Louis University School of Law. I live about 10 minutes outside of Ferguson. And my involvement in Ferguson began when I saw Mike Brown's dead body laying on the street for over 4.5 hours, saw it on social media. And it was a spectacle. And to me, it was a fresh cut in an old wound, because I'm a person who knows about the history of civil rights and lynching in the United States, and the spectacle of leaving a body in public view as a warning to others is an outrage to my sense of dignity. So I saw that. 20 seconds left. I saw that as an assault on myself, and I went out and protested. I was tear gassed. I had guns pointed at me. I was assaulted. I was arrested for being a legal observer. And all these things happened to me, so I have no choice but to continue to be engaged and to do so diligently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Derica Purnell. I was not anticipating that. I'm from St. Louis. A week and a half before I started law school, Mike Brown was killed 4 blocks away from the neighborhood where I last lived. Today, this is the most difficult thing I think I've ever had to do, because I'm sitting next to the people who are responsible for the guns that were pointed in my face. So I hope that, you know, people didn't think they were going to come to Cambridge and escape in a very important conversation, because they have someone from their neighborhood right here next to them.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I hope I get an opportunity to talk about some of the things that we were trying to do in the community before Michael Brown, and some of the things that we've engaged in since Michael Brown, because outside of a lot of the violence and hostility, we've heard the message. We heard the message before we recognized that we needed change, and it's particularly in the apartment community, where we had disengagement from the rest of the city, which has 9 neighborhood associations and is very well integrated, except for the very poor areas. We had started forcing landlords legally, in legal binding obligations, to clean up the apartments, to make quality of life better, to partner with us, not only to arrest people for gun violence, but also to clean apartments up, clean up broken windows, broken doors, tow derelict vehicles, take ownership. I know my time's up,
Yes.
but we've done a lot more since. But it's like trying to turn around an aircraft carrier.
You have to tell them who you are.
My name's Tom Jackson. I'm Chief of Police in the city of Ferguson.
Next.
My name is James Knowles. I'm the mayor of the city of Ferguson. I've been a Ferguson resident for 35 of my 35 years. I've been on the city council for 10 years. I've been mayor for 4 of those years. During the past several months, we've had a great opportunity to have a lot of conversation and really talk about issues that people don't like to talk about when it's not in your face, issues that exist but don't necessarily aren't comfortable to talk about, aren't comfortable to deal with, unless people feel like they need to deal with them. And obviously over the past several months, I think with all of those issues coming to the surface, the chief, myself, many others, have had a great opportunity to meet with a lot of very spirited, very intelligent individuals who want to talk about change. One of the things that I wanted to always impress upon them is this. At 25 years old, I decided to run for city council not because it's glamorous, not because it's glorious. Making $300 a month being mayor is not exactly my career ambition. But I can tell you this, if you serve in those positions, it's because you want to make positive change. And that's something that I've been focused on for the past 10 years. It's something I'll continue to be focused on. Now I think we have a much larger group of individuals engaged in the community to help guide us in that change. I know the chief, myself, and the staff in the city is looking forward to making those improvements and moving this community forward in the future.
My name is David Spence. I was up here earlier. I'm CEO of a pharmaceutical packaging company in St. Louis and a St. Louis native. And it broke my heart to see the lack of leadership and the lack of understanding after the August shooting. And what I did was I stepped in and said, somebody has to be the lead blocker, put it in Patriots terms, and open up the conversation and start to talk about the things that aren't pretty. And so that's what I did. And Lance McCarthy, I called him and I said, Lance, what are we going to do? And we put out the dragnet. We had about 40 people to my home. We had an easel, and we started writing ideas. And that's a healthy start to a new chapter. That's what has to happen. And I appreciate that she's very uncomfortable, but we have to face it and get beyond it. Because if we continue to dwell on what happened, it's not changing anything.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Muhammad, founder of Peacekeepers St. Louis. Our position is that we act as a buffer between corruption and law enforcement, as acting as an advocate for our people against that corruption in law enforcement and in politics through proactive community involvement. We want to ensure the same freedoms, justice, and equalities for indigenous peoples, people that are offered to other people throughout our country. And when we talk about leveling the playing field and removing white privilege, we definitely want to get to the root of those origins of those problems and address them, because it is an ugly reality that we deal with. It's been an ugly history, and we have to eradicate it and deal with it if we want to move forward in the future.
Anybody who stands for inequality, can I get their right fist in the air?
For equality?
For equality.
You need the mic.
You don't want inequality. I got y'all attention now. Y'all know that tool for men in black? You know the one that they flash and it leaves your body but get rid of all recollections and memories? Well, round my way, the cops got the same thing, only it work in reverse, because one flash from that tool will get rid of that body, leaving only recollections and memories. See, cops killing us. We killing ourselves. Plus, AIDS and cancer is rapidly taking our lives. But if none of these killers are slowing down, then y'all tell me, how the fuck are we supposed to survive? See, usually I'm on stage. I may punchline. I may scheme. I may tell a few jokes, but all our lives we've been punched on, scheme, hung from trees to joke. But oh, this ain't got nothing to do with y'all. Y'all want me to pipe down? Well, try telling that to the parents of Oscar Grant, Eric Gordon, Sean Bell, and Mike Brown. See, they say this is about race. I say it's right versus wrong. Let's not get it misconstrued, because in Ferguson, I march with white people. We got tear gas like black cops. So tell me, how the fuck am I not supposed to be confused? I mean, an 18-year-old kid died. So we burn shit up. I mean, and what they do, they turn their back on us. But Martin Luther King said, rioting is the language of the unheard. That was a message for all you deaf motherfuckers, like when we say fuck the government. And y'all take that as a joke. I mean, y'all did all of that fighting for the right to, but failed to teach us how to vote. I mean, y'all fought for desegregation, and when y'all won, y'all felt glory, but then get mad at the white man for him teaching us his story. See, it's not my fault that they look at me like a criminal. But when my wife, when my kids, when my brothers look at me, they see a businessman, they see a college student, they see a college graduate, they see a strong black man. Because I am Mike Brown, I am Oscar Grant, I am Eric Gardner, I am Von Derek Myers, I am Kim King, I am Kerry Ball, I am a black man in America.
That's right.
Thank you. We're going to start with questions from the panel for other panelists, and we're gonna move into having them have a dialogue, and at some point, after we get past them, we're gonna have questions from the audience. Questions from the audience. No, they're gonna go first.
He's ready.
So we're gonna start with Brother Justin. He has a question, and who are you directing it to? Then we
Yes. I'm going to direct this question to the police chief and the mayor. So, gentlemen, my question regards the issues of racial profiling, police brutality, and predatory policing. In Ferguson last year, there were over 24,000 arrest warrants issued in a town with a population of 21,000 people. And the population of about 2/3 African American, over 86% of your traffic stops were of African Americans, only 12% of white Americans. You have the second largest source of revenue in your town, Mayor, is the issuing of tickets and fines to these poor, disenfranchised communities. And so we went to the United Nations, and people at the UN acknowledged that the targeting of African Americans makes it look like that there's apartheid happening in the United States of America. And so I guess my question to you is, what steps are you taking to ameliorate the problems of racial profiling and police brutality and predatory policing in your department?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question. First of all, your numbers are a little off on the warrants, but that's really is irrelevant. What we've done is we actually started it 3 years ago. We started a warrant amnesty program that allows people to come in and have their warrants recalled. We also instituted a program through the Ferguson Youth Initiative, which works with at-risk youth, and through an organization called the Queen of Peace, to give kids the opportunity, if they've got a traffic ticket or a minor offense, they can, instead of getting caught up in that spiral of being bogged down by a debt from a ticket, they're required to get drug counseling to get into the program, but then they're allowed to do community service instead of having to pay a fine. Because that's one of the things that bothers me about seeing young people, especially young poor people, get tickets, that the only recourse a lot of times is a fine. And if you don't have money, then you don't go to court, and then you get a warrant, and then you have more fines, and that's just not what I want to represent. So we've instituted those programs. As far as the policing, predatory policing, and so forth, we're engaged in programs now concerning bias-based policing, which is through the COPS program, Department of Justice, and it really takes officers to look into inherent biases that they may not even realize that they have, to try to recognize that. And one of the nice things about some of the classes that we're engaged in now is they also involve members of the community who may not agree with the police, so that they get to engage too and also understand the biases that they have. So those are good programs. We've also in the last 3 years, trained 2 of our officers as instructors in racial profiling, and we've offered those programs to the 30 North County municipalities that are members of the North County Police Chiefs Association, and we've been putting those training programs on for the last 3 years. So that's a start of an answer to your question, I guess.
Mayor, you have a question of one of the panelists.
Well, I did want to also talk about just briefly about the funding mechanism. There's over a dozen funding streams for the city of Ferguson's government. While fines and forfeitures as themselves is the second highest, there's about a dozen total, and it only makes up less than 15% of the total general revenue only. Out of total revenue streams, it's even less than that, it's less than 10%. So I think it's a misnomer when you make it seem like the city runs itself strictly on that. I mean, it's less than 10% of what we do to fund these youth programs, to fund the police department, parks, rec, pave the streets. However, at that same point, the chief, myself, and the city council has made it our goal to work with individuals to make restorative justice measures and to make sure that we have fix-it tickets, to make sure that we fix the issues out there and not be punitive. If the issue is the person doesn't have insurance, we want them to get insurance, not be punitive and penalize them. If you give them a $200 ticket and they can't afford insurance on their car already, it's going to be even harder to get insurance. So those are the sorts of things that we have been working on, we'll continue to work on, because we want to make sure that people can abide by the law and not strictly be punitive. So
Thank you,
the
man.
city
We
has
have
been
a
focused on
question
that.
for one of the panelists. I need you to ask, and I want people to ask questions of you, and I also want you to ask questions of them. So it's an open dialogue. Please, do you have a question for one of the panelists?
I've got one, and maybe this may sound silly to some people, but I think there's there's probably some bias in the audience of what you saw on TV or what you read on social media. I am here to tell you, Ferguson was not a dysfunctional place. It was a very nice, mixed, really functioning community. It really was. What you saw on TV, Ferguson was probably the least likely place of North County, St. Louis, for that to happen. Now you're going to say, what are you talking about? But let me tell you, it really is, and that is the fact. Now, what happened? You can't change history, but we can learn from it. Of the municipalities, there are a lot worse than Ferguson on fines, predatory policing, and taking care of taking advantage of the people that have the least ability to pay.
Brother Paul?
Right. I'd like to interject on that, if I may.
Fix it, Jesus.
First and foremost, I respect your perspective, Dave, but we do all understand that being black and white America and being white in America, we have two different realities. So we have to speak on that, and we can't not address that elephant in the room. So while for some, Ferguson may be a utopia, for blacks that have gone through Ferguson and that live in Ferguson, they have a completely different experience with free casing, with profiling, with joblessness. We have a strip of West Florissant that was burned down, but what they focus in on is that the people just rioted and tore up buildings. First and foremost, we have to address the fact that oppression leads to insurrection. So that is the reality in which we function in, and none of those buildings belong to black America. We have people that are of other ethnicities, Arabs, Indians, and we have very few that were along that corridor that were owned by black people that were thriving businesses, or even if they were not owned by black people, those people that owned those businesses were not in the business of revitalizing and putting money and jobs back into that community. So if you do not respect me, you do not invest in me, all you want to do is leech and take money out of my community, and then when you're done, you get in your Mercedes and ride back to the suburbs. I don't give a damn about your store. All of it needs to burn. So that was the thought process behind the people. So when there's oppression and people are not heard, then they react. That is an emotional reaction. That is a reaction that anybody will deal with. If I have dysfunction, because it was dysfunctional, we have a polarized community, because we have black people on the north side and to the south side along West Florissant that live in those apartment complexes. Those are not the primary taxpayers. Those that are even considered, those are the downcast, those are the throwaways. Then we have the part of Old Ferguson, which you all saw where the police department was. That is Old Ferguson, where there are plantation homes, where there are people that they consider to be the better of the community. So my point is, there's two different realities, and people, just because nothing is happening and people aren't vocalizing their dissatisfaction or they're not expressing it, we go along to get along. You know what I'm saying? So there's a saying that when we, if you go along to get along, it just, Ferguson was just like all of St. Louis. And I want to make sure that we understand that this problem is not exclusive to Ferguson, St. Louis. Ferguson is a very small town with a very small population. Now, the unfortunate reality of Ferguson is that it's over 70% black, and the police force does not reflect that demographic. There were 53 police officers, and only 3 of those officers were black. So they did not represent, and they did not have the compassion and the empathy. So we have to go and look at training. We have to go and look at a association with those people. You police for 12 hours a day, but you don't have any engagement and interaction with those people. You should be of the people, you should be from the people, and not all officers have to be black, because oftentimes we often trade the white slave master for a black one, and they try to overcompensate and be harder on our people than the white man. But we have to get rid of a mentality, and we have to get invested in the training process and allow those people that look like you and I to be involved in that process, because we are intelligent, we are competent, capable, and articulate. We can get involved in those procedures and process, and if we talk about true reconciliation on the force of law enforcement, it doesn't involve us saying, I'm sorry for our reaction for burning up your buildings and reacting in a manner in which we have been forced to just be combative. When I deal with a police officer, I'm a business owner, I'm a father. You know what I'm saying? We are my brother here, he owns businesses, but we are still, based on the way that we look right now, profiled and treated a certain way when encountered by the police, because you don't have a personal interaction. You're not willing to dialogue with myself and my brothers and my sisters and see past the color and see the transparency of our spirit and see that we have more to offer than what you are trained to see us as perpetrators of a crime. I was just looking on Facebook.
Can I interject?
I'm sorry.
Can I
Listen,
interject?
one second, Queen.
Oh, no,
Indeed.
okay.
There's a police officer that is training. I don't know if you all just saw this. It just came across my timeline with the faces of black men down south as targets. So if you are trained and if you have not had any relationship with black men and women, and you base it off prejudicial treatment or what you've learned from where you come from, shame on you if you are fearful when you step in a community and all you can do is react, like several police officers have done, because they have a presumption of fear before they even encounter me. If I encounter a 16, 17, 18-year-old black man or 25 of their own, I'm looking at him, you're prejudging the situation. So far be it, all things being equal, if I prejudge you at the same time and think that you are a threat to me if I'm a threat to you. But we have to change that reality. You have to humble yourself and come to the table and say, I know we made mistakes. Okay, what do we need to do? How can we police you better? And how can we get invested in the community when we don't have this uniform on and don't come with a very communist and forceful and radical and hurtful
Paul,
regime?
Love you.
I love you too, bro.
We're gonna give the mayor a chance to respond.
I don't even know if it was a question, brother, but he can do what he do.
You was good.
I would like to hear his responses.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Please let my sister speak.
Just really quick. I hear my brother Muhammad. I'm not gonna call the people in that community castaways. I'm not gonna call them dysfunctional.
That's right.
I'm not gonna say that they're the throwaways because they live in apartments. I'm not gonna make those same suggestions. I also disagree that Ferguson was the least likely community for this to happen. I think one fundamental flaw in this panel is that you have people who disagree about what the problem actually is. So when you hear Mr. Spence talk about what you've heard in social media, Ferguson is not chaotic. Obviously, he thinks the problem is the protesters' response and not the murder of Michael Brown.
Right.
That's the problem. That's why people are invited here today. So if we're talking about solution-oriented, for someone to say, Ferguson is an anomaly, then you're saying that Ferguson is the least likely place for a white police officer to kill an unarmed black man, and that is simply not true. Simply not true.
Right.
Data says that it's not true. Police record says that that's not true. It's just simply not true. So I don't know what part of Ferguson you're talking about. Have you lived in Ferguson?
I have not, but I'm near there.
That's great. So for someone who's actually lived in this community, spent my summers on date, caught the bus past that quick trip that went up in flames every single day my senior year of high school, that is very likely. Actually, I'm surprised it happened so late. So I think if we're going to talk about solutions, we cannot talk about responding to what protesters need, because protesters were responding. We need to respond to the problem, which is the unarmed killing of black men, which is the killing of black men who have a butter knife in other parts of North St. Louis. Those are the problems. Those are the problems, not protesters. Someone talked about sweeping up windows. What does that have to do with Darren Wilson shooting Michael Brown?
right.
Can someone
That's
explain that to me?
Thank you.
So, in response, we have fundamentally the same message, and it bothers me a little bit. There's no acknowledgement that we are listening, and that we have listened. When I got there 4 years before Michael Brown, in my first year, I promoted the first 2 ever African American supervisors in the police department's history, and hired 6 new officers, 4 of which were African American. I lose them to higher paying departments with more opportunity. I personally came from St. Louis County Police Department, where I did 31 years. I'm originally from Massachusetts, by the way, Pittsfield.
Sorry, y'all.
But so prior to Michael Brown, we were really reaching out. We were doing resource displays, trying to engage for a neighborhood watch, neighborhood association in the apartment community. And it's difficult to get people to engage when there's poverty, they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're getting up in the morning and working all day and coming home to the kids. I recognize that, but we have tried to engage. Since Michael Brown, underneath all the anger, we heard the message. We're putting together a civilian oversight board for the police department. We're starting an Explorer program for our own high school, the one that's in the city of Ferguson. And we're doing a lot of other things. We're working with One Ferguson, the Ferguson Youth Initiative, a bunch of community engagement programs. So we're hearing, we're listening, and we are trying to bring the people together in the community. And that's our goal. Otherwise, why would I be knowing some of the response that I'm going to get?
And I'd like to talk about something that was brought up earlier, I think by Dr. Lance, actually, about the economic issue. First weekend, Chris Hayes from MSNBC wanted to see the other side of Ferguson, so I took him over to those plantation homes, as you refer to them, that are on the other side of the old part of the community. And the first thing he says to me when he looks at me, he goes, "Wow, this is where the white people live, isn't it?" And I said, "Wow, that really says a lot about you as a person to say that, because you assume that those big homes are only occupied by white people, but they're not. They're occupied by many African Americans who are lawyers, doctors, business owners. That community, though it is a different socioeconomic part of our community, is not white. And that is one of the beauties that Ferguson always has been, at least for the past 20 years, is that even those parts of our community are very integrated. Now, where we have a huge disconnect, and one thing that we continue to focus on, and it's a regional problem in St. Louis, is the issue of housing. The issue of housing and keeping people in a community long enough to become engaged in a community. You look at Michael Brown, 4 years of high school. He went to 3 different high schools. 3 different high schools. How are you supposed to get active in a high school, on a sports team, at a community? How is your family supposed to become engaged with the police officers?
Hold on.
So
Hold on, excuse
so
me.
some of this,
Hold on.
So-
One second.
You have to address it.
I mean, his
Can't
history
bring
and
Mike
where he
Brown
went
up
to
without
school
talking about his schooling.
is not relevant to.
That's right, not
No,
relevant.
If he
no.
went to 10 schools, I'm with you, but
No,
if he went to
okay,
10
well,
schools,
let's-
that's
well-
not an issue of
Well, no,
what
it-
happened to him in the end.
No, but it's an issue that continues to be brought up, is the disconnect between the community, between law enforcement and the community, between the community and government. And one of the issues that we have is we have a lot of young people, we have a lot of families that are functionally homeless that go throughout the region, and unfortunately, we don't have a good place for them to get grounded, to get active, to get educated, and provide a lot of those economic opportunities for them, and to help bring some of those
But it
economic
sounds like-
opportunities up.
Yes.
No, you
It's
gave
not-
a,
it's not his fault.
You just gave
No,
a
this is-
relevant justification for his demise.
Right.
No,
Oh,
this is some of the institutional issues that we have to deal with to help a lot of the African American community to get some of those economic opportunities.
Sir, I would like to just interject. I take great offense at the implication
Indeed.
that Michael Brown was somehow responsible
There's no
for
implication.
that. So, no, let me finish.
No.
So this idea that no matter how many schools he went to, what I believe was a highly irresponsible act of releasing a video of an incident that was totally unrelated to his killing. The idea that these sort of systematic problems, although there are problems systematically in the issues of housing and economic inequality. In the case of Michael Brown, you had a young man who was walking down the street, jaywalking at worst. Police officer cut him off, shouted an expletive at him, and he was an unarmed 18-year-old. And so in the aftermath of the killing of this 18-year-old, his body laying in the street, I went to Geneva with Leslie McSpadden and Mike Brown's mother. She told the world how she had to stand there for 4 hours to look at her son's body laying in the street in the hot sun in the summer, blood on the concrete. She wasn't allowed to go to the body. She wasn't allowed to console. So in the context of this type of behavior, if we want to move the discussion to solutions, I think we can begin talking about solutions. And the question is, when will you offer your resignation? And the question is, no, let me finish. I'm gonna finish this. Really? Yeah. Okay. Because
The question, let him answer.
so I'll let you answer. This is for both the chief and the mayor.
Well, I don't intend to resign. I can tell you that for the past 6 months, we've done, the chief, myself, the city council, the staff, has worked very diligently because we are committed to making improvements and to finding solutions. When we talk about these issues, the issue that I brought up about the transient nature of a lot of the residents in North St. Louis County, that is a huge problem, and to deal with that is a solution to bringing the community together, to bringing law enforcement together. I just heard earlier people complain that law enforcement does not respect the community because they don't interact with the community. Well, if a law enforcement officer does not have an interaction with the community, if that resident only lives there for 6 months before he moves to a different community, it's really hard to build that relationship. We are focused on building those relationships, but we have to build stability in these young people's lives and these residents' lives so that we can also connect with them as a community.
I have a question.
But the police chief was going to respond also, right?
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I don't intend to resign until I've seen some real progress here. The problem is that Ferguson is my community, and it doesn't cease to be my community if I quit and dump this problem into somebody else's lap. I've been working since I got here almost 5 years ago now to improve quality of life and policing in the city of Ferguson, and I intend to stay for a while to continue to do that.
Oops. Oops.
Oh, yeah. My question is to Chief Jackson, and I'm being as reserved as I possibly can. Darren Wilson, this is my question. How long did you know Darren Wilson before he was a Ferguson officer?
I never met him before that.
Never met him before. I'm sorry, y'all,
Take your time.
but it's more so not a question. My fault, Andre, but I know Darren Wilson. Darren Wilson went to school with me. He went to school with me. Darren Wilson grew up around black people. Darren Wilson has always been fucked up in the head. And I don't know how you interview, you become an officer, you go through whatever training it is and not realize how fucked up in the head Darren Wilson is. And just to be, let me describe fucked up in the head. I mean to the point where you've always had a problem with authority. You always had a problem with someone saying something back to you, whether it be white or black. Now, this is something that I know personally. And I really don't have any questions for Chief Jackson and the mayor. And you guys now see what we've been going through for 160 days with these incompetent motherfuckers.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
We're gonna get questions from the audience.
Okay.
I mean, hold on. Now this has to be questions. I mean, I
Can
don't
I
want
ask
your life history. I love you. I love everybody. You want to come back?
Just one more question. Just one more question. It's a solutions-oriented question. I
Solution-oriented
promise.
question.
I promise.
Yes.
So we watched this wonderful screening about Roosevelt High School, which is in South St. Louis. My brother went to Roosevelt, actually. I think whenever black boys kill other black boys, we start mentoring programs. We find them mentors. We get Obama to make a black men initiative. But when white men kill black boys, we don't start mentoring programs in white schools. We don't go to their schools and connect it with mentors. They don't hear from black men. They don't hear from men of color until they're killing them. They don't hear from men of color until they're arresting them. So, Mr. Spence, have you created any partnerships with any white schools to introduce them to communities of color, to address the systemic inequality so they won't grow up and kill black boys, so they won't grow up and become slumlords in places like Ferguson, but keep places like Overland or St. Charles looking really, really nice? Have you?
Okay. No, but I also have created over 2,000 jobs, and that affects 2,000 families positively. And I think a paycheck provides dignity and providing jobs and a future. So if you're looking for a specific answer, no to your question. But you know what? People can affect positive change in many, many ways. And everybody has their own definition of that.
Thank you. We're going to go to the...
Real quick, I just wanted to dispel the narrative that I did see in the movie that I wanted to speak to. There were, and I understand there's different perspective, but being born and raised in St. Louis all my life, I have to speak truth to power. And the inaccuracies in the video is that one of the young men, and that was his perspective, but it made it seem as though St. Louis is just desolate, as if it's completely hopeless, as if we are not empowering ourselves and we're not working towards collective change and bringing our community into the greatness that it has always been, and exploring or rediscovering our common unity, which is community. That is what we are working towards. We have black prominence, and it's not all poverty. Everybody's mother is not on crack. Mine never did it. She raised me as a single black woman in an apartment complex, which is called O'Fallon Place. They consider the projects now 17th and Cass. She raised me to be very productive, accountable. I'm a father, 5 children, a husband, a business owner. So, you know, we are breaking the mold of those stereotypes, and we don't want, because you all are on the outside of St. Louis, to think that that is the status quo, because it's not. You know, statistics can say one thing, but statistics are still manipulated by the manipulator. So I just want you all to understand that, being from St. Louis.
Thank you. We're going to... Question.
Yes, for the mayor and the police chief, if we're endowed as Americans with certain inalienable rights to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, stop and frisk is not distributed on an equal basis. Can you be an example to the rest of America and ban stop and frisk?
Okay, no, okay. The question is, would he consider hold on. The question is, I want everybody to hear it because you don't have a microphone. Can you, mayor or police chief, ban stop and frisk, or would consider banning stop and frisk?
Yes, yes, we don't employ that. Frisks of people are based on the law, probable cause, reasonable suspicion, Supreme Court decisions. So they are required to be carried out equally.
Next, we can go to, we'll go to sister right. We can go to 2 sisters. Go to one on the right, then the one on the left. Question, please. Yes, you count.
So my question is for the mayor and the police. 2 parts.
No, one part.
Just a long question. Just make it a long
In the interest of time, we have other people, so please, one part.
Okay, so since you've been hearing a lot of people saying that they want to have more interaction between police and the citizens of Ferguson as well as other cities, what are your plans to initiate that other than complaining that people move from place to place?
Okay, hold on. What is your plan to engage the community around discussions for moving forward?
So I've had quite a few meetings with the COPS program, COPS program out of the Department of Justice to talk about ways to engage, and we're going to institute more community-oriented policing programs. We're going to start a program specifically for the disenfranchised areas in the apartment complexes.
We have it right here.
I don't want to hear V-Day anymore, and I would like to know what pressure was put on McCullough, the district attorney, to remove himself from the professor and then from the police chief. You understand the question?
What pressure was put on the DA to remove himself from hearing the grand jury?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Justin.
And then the police chief.
Yes, so so you're talking about Robert McCullough. So there was an outcry. There were, I think, over 80,000 signatures of citizens delivered to the Justice Center where he works. And I can say, as someone who's actually taught lawyers' ethics, that the standard for recusal for people in judicial office is the fear of public opinion and lack of confidence in the impartiality of a judicial officer. So someone in the prosecutor's position, like Robert McCullough, was in a position where there was a great deal of evidence that there was a lack of public confidence in his neutrality. And of course, there were reports widespread in the media. And so again, that's not a technical legal standard, but that is the theory behind the desire to have a neutral prosecutor. And so he rejected those, the delivery of those signatures by State Senator Nasheed and decided to move forward anyway.
And also there was pressure put on the governor of the state of Missouri to replace Mr. McCullough, and he chose not to do that.
Hold on, excuse me. No. Thank you, we love you. Sister.
Hi, my name is Michelle Hall. I'm a law student here at Harvard, and I went to college in St. Louis. First of all, I'm pretty upset at how I feel like Derek Hill was disrespected and talked around during the panel, both by people who she directed at questions to and other panelists. And that was extremely frustrating, especially because she's the only woman sitting on the panel.
Your question, please.
Yes, no, I just had to say that.
I'm with you. I didn't cut you off. Love you.
But my second question is,
She's upset that she felt as though the only woman on the panel was talked around and not given equal treatment or the due respect of being on the panel, was her opinion. So now she has a question.
yeah, my question is, what steps are being taken now to demilitarize the police and not like years ago?
No, what's the question?
My friends being tear gassed and chased on television. I was watching my friends and the students that I mentored being chased by these armored tanks. And I want to know what is being done today to demilitarize the police in Ferguson right now.
The question is, what is being done to demilitarize the police in Ferguson?
Well, let me explain that the city of Ferguson doesn't have any military vehicles, doesn't have a SWAT team, doesn't have tear gas, doesn't have rubber bullets. No, the Ferguson Police Department was where the question was directed. All the tear gas and pepper was deployed by the SWAT teams from St. Louis County, St. Louis City, Missouri State Highway Patrol, and
Under
other
whose
SWAT
authority?
teams. Under the authority
Under whose
of
authority?
the incident commander, whoever that was at the time.
What's the name of the authority, of the commanding officer that gave the authority, that
Ju-
sanctioned that?
For the first few weeks, it would have been the Missouri State Highway Patrol commander on the scene. But also, just to point out that tear gas was only deployed once shots started being fired, and that's when the
That's not true. We were out there every day of the unrest. That's a lie.
Hold on.
No,
Excuse me.
no.
Excuse me.
Mr.
I'm
Hey,
gonna-
Mr.
we're
Mr.
gonna come back
Norman,
to the
check
question.
this
I
out.
wanna-
No,
I
he's
definitely
lying.
understand
He's
that.
lying.
I understand
No,
what
it's
you're
not true.
saying. But we're talking about an incident right now who people on this fucking panel went through. So you can't tell me that we was tear gassed because of no gunshots.
Exactly.
Because I wasn't tear gassed because of gunshots. I was tear gassed because I was standing there and I was making it inconvenient for you motherfuckers.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So,
Further.
hold on, for me, I'm going back to the question. Is there steps being done to demilitarize the police?
He said it's
that are
not him.
actively-
He dodged
Hold on.
liability.
It's not. We gonna tell you. We been there. It's not. We gonna answer it for him. It's not. Next question.
No, we're
Anytime Negroes get out
Nothing's
of
being
line, they
done.
will use the same force
right here,
that they
we got
use
4
fire.
minutes.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm a 3L here. I'm also a student at the law
Indeed,
What is the
thank you.
question? Hold on, no. What is your question? I love you. I need your question.
What is the Civilian Review Board going to be empowered to do? Because from my interpretation, the Civilian Review
Well, no. What is your question? I love you.
She
I need
asked
your
the
question because we got limited time.
Will the board have subpoena power over
Yes.
witnesses?
Yes,
Will
that's
the
the
board
question.
have power to actually make and require police officers to actually discipline other police
Yes.
officers who are doing misconduct and engaging in police brutality? Because in New York, that does not happen.
Thank you,
And
sis.
Eric Garner was
Great question.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
We need the
thank you.
power and the power to discipline. Great question.
So at this juncture, we do not have the board is not constituted yet because we have a task force that is continuing to meet and setting up both the board and the procedures. That is a conversation that the task force is having, and it sounds like it's something that they are asking for, to be able to compel people to come before the board, to be able to compel people to give witness before the board. So, what we've done is we've invited NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, has come. We actually went to their conference a couple months ago, and we've invited them to come to Ferguson, and they've helped us go through a great deal of information about how the 1,500 plus civilian review boards across the country operate. These citizens are going to choose how that structure is, and that's the structure the city council is going to move forward.
One second. I love you, Auntie. 1 second. No. What? The timeline for the Civilian Review Board.
Yeah, so the citizens.
Hold
the
on.
citizens
Let him
are-
answer the question. Let him answer the
Sure.
question.
The citizens, we talked about a timeline. The task force members do not want to set a timeline for themselves because they want to make sure it's done right and done right the first time. So that's one thing that they've been adamant about. Now, there are many, many protesters who are members of that task force, people who walk those lines, people who are tear gassed, who sit on that board and will be helping make that recommendation. So it will be a very balanced recommendation, I believe.
Now, what we're gonna do is this. I need you to listen. We are going to, don't flip out, officially end the panel, but we're gonna keep going because some people are employed and they're on overtime and other stuff. So we have to technically end, but we're gonna keep going. If you understand the concept. Yes. So people are free to leave. And I don't trust anybody going any place, but I'm not trying to shut people down or censor. I'm trying to get the question. We want to hear the answers, and we want to have a dialogue. Auntie, not yet. We're going to the back. No, you can, right there, you good.
My question is for the mayor and for the police chief. The Washington Post and the New York Times both highlighting how corrosive the collection of fees and charges, sometimes for minor things like trash collection, the police fees, the policing of and collection and the stopping of motorists for traffic fines, for example, has been highlighted as excessive and oppressive to your population of folks. And so my question for you is, instead of making it easier.
What is the question?
She's asking.
Instead of making it easier for folks to pay the fines, how about doing away with the fines and weaning yourself off of these fines forever?
Thank you.
We actually already did, in many cases back in September, remove many fees and fines, and try to move towards, in many cases, again, having corrective measures done instead of being punitive with the fines for things like trash collection or not having insurance or having broken taillight, et cetera. So those sort of issues, yes, we've already done in many cases, and we'll continue to examine because, again, we want to work on corrective action and not on punitive action.
We have right here, question, Auntie. What?
Because I think we're talking different purposes. When you said you ran to make change and you said you were not going to leave until the problem solved, what I think would be helpful, what do you think the problem is?
What do you think the problem is? They have to, okay, the question that you said you ran to make change and you ran because you love your community, what do you view the problem is?
Do we have another day?
No,
It's
we're
gonna take a
gonna do
while.
this. We're gonna start on this end and come every down. Let everybody answer that question because we have to close. So everybody's gonna answer that because everybody counts. They're gonna answer the question. They're not evading it, but I want everybody to speak. So we're gonna let Brother Justin say what he thinks the problem is, and we're just gonna go right on down. And we want to hear everybody's view on that. And we have back to 1 minute. Clock's
Well, two core problems. Number one, although it should be apparent that Black Lives Matter, to many people in our community, it's not apparent as demonstrated by their behavior. So problem number one, we have to value all lives, including Black lives in this country, and respect their basic human rights and civil rights. Two, accountability. So whenever killings happen, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and nobody is held accountable, Black lives matter a little bit less. They matter a little bit less because now there's precedent for what you can get away with and not be held accountable for. So someone needs to lose their job.
That's right.
I suggest the two people sitting to my right.
Thank you. What do you think the problem is?
That needs to be fixed.
That needs to be fixed. Oh, thank you. What do you think the problem is?
Okay, so I think that whenever someone is killed by the police, there needs to be a trial, and that does not happen. I think that's an essential problem in Ferguson. I think that's an essential problem across the country. We wait. There are people who text their bosses before they call the ambulance to save a dying person. That's a problem. So that's one essential problem. Two, there's leadership in this country that will much rather hold on to their power because it's in their interest rather than listen to what most people in their community want, and that is new leadership. So that's an essential problem. The lack of, there's too much prosecutorial discretion, so there needs to be an automatic trial. Two, there needs to be new leadership who also believes that there needs to be a trial instead of people trying to justify a broken system by partnering with drug programs but not teaching their cops not to be racist.
Thank you. Chief, what do you perceive to be the problem that needs to be fixed?
Well, there's the long term and the very long term. Very long term is the problem of poverty and the lack of love in some people's lives. If you don't have love, then you know it's a hard chore. You can be poor and be loved and succeed, but if you're poor and you're not loved, it's much more difficult. From what I've seen in my 35 years in law enforcement. But the other thing is just talking about law enforcement involved shootings. I'm working with our association to try to establish a national policy for what the procedures are when an officer is involved in a shooting. Because the lessons we've learned from Michael Brown are exactly that. There have to be procedures that are followed everywhere in the country so that that there is a transparent system. And also something that I learned from this is you have to talk right away and explain why, when, and what happened, because the police really can't kill someone in this country and not explain to the people why they did it.
Thank you. Mayor, what do you perceive the problem to be?
I think it goes, to both to economic and educational equality of opportunity, and I think that's something that throughout our community, throughout many places across the country, there is still a very basic inequality in the opportunities and also in educational opportunities, economic opportunities and educational opportunities, and of course those two are very much intertwined. It's something that we see in Ferguson. It's something that we see across the country. It leads to criminality and other things down the road when people don't have those opportunities. And so I see that working on that is the way forward for many across the country, really.
Thank you. Excuse. Excuse me. No, not on my show. We're going to go down, we're going to get a panelist a chance to speak. Yeah, I'm up here moderating, I'm going to moderate. I'm not moderating the audience. The panelists are going to speak. If you want to be on the next panel, we can get you up here. Mr. Spence.
Okay, I'm not an expert in law enforcement. One thing, you asked a question about Bob McCullough. I called probably 14 elected officials in our capital for our governor to step in and remove him because there's a large constituency that did not trust that a fair hearing was going to happen. And our governor, who you saw in full daylight, didn't have the political courage to do it, bottom line. And he should have been removed to the side. Bottom line. Second of all, I can't cure everything, but one thing is economic disparity. And I think that's the root of all this. It is economic disparity. And so, do you think as many crimes would happen if people had better opportunities? No. I can't solve that. However, we can talk about opportunity, economic disparity, and I agree we have to talk about racism, and it's an uncomfortable conversation.
Okay. Excuse me. We got
All right.
2 more panelists that flew a long way to be heard. We all walked here. Brother Paul?
It's very simple as black and white. So the problem is the disregard, the dehumanization, and devaluing of black lives, and which is really why Nixon or McCullough or whomever were negligent, and they were shirking their responsibility when there was a human violation, because it was not personal and they did not feel it. If it were a white young man killed by a black officer, he would have not even had to be indicted. He would have been charged for murder, and we have proof of that because a black cop was released, or he was relieved of his duty in St. Louis for hitting the black man, the young white boy's hand in St. Louis, and he lost his job. So it's very clear the racial divide is very polarized. So the racial component has to be addressed, and the compassion, to have to beg another human being to treat you humanely through policy and legislation is an injustice within itself. So we have to address that before we can move any further talking about the restructuring and the panels and the boards, because if you do not even take in consideration anything I have to say of value being a black man sitting on a board, then I'm just a face and a pawn and a token. So you have to value what I say, and you have to realize that there is error that was committed, but the Constitution still says we are 3/5 of a human being, which if you do the math means I'm only 60% human. What is the other 40? So, it does not equate. It is not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? So this is why it's so important, the voice of collective unity, actions, protests, movement forward to force the hands of us understanding the importance of our vote and galvanizing and priming and prepping candidates that will see after the black agenda that actually care and that are willing to stand up on what they say they're gonna do. And if they don't, we'll force their hand, because we have all the people in this room all over the world that agree that black lives do matter. And if you agree they matter, then you have to put your money where your mouth is.
Thank you. Brother Oak?
My brother put it well, but I think the biggest problem is that I always fit the description. No matter what,
That's right.
I always fit the description. I got tattoos on my face. I'm a young black man. They don't take the time out to see that I've graduated from college, that I own an Allstate, that I own an income tax service, that I'm really involved in my community. I always fit the description. The bad thing about it, as well as is that I have my conceal and carry in Missouri, and that may not seem big, but think about me getting pulled over with a gun in my car that I can legally have. I worry about that. So I don't know, because of the things that have gone on for the generations and generations. I don't know if I'm gonna make it home now because I have a gun in my car and because I know this officer feels threatened by me. See, the problem is we talk so much about policy and what we need to do, and we need all of that. We need community involvement, empowerment, all of that. But at the end of the day, the prerequisite is we have to be alive. We as black men, we have to be alive to reap the benefits of whatever program that they trying to put together 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And police brutality and police killings are essentially a domino effect that y'all get it.
Thanks. Before we go, I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank Mr. Ogletree.
Listen, before you all leave, I want to repeat our thanks to you for coming. I think one of the things that we've learned, and it's very clear, obviously it's not a one-day conversation. these Saturday events work. I think we're going to try to have a follow-up, and we will have more of this. And so we look to our website to find out. Thank you again for coming.